People don't think I'm disabled. They think I can do everything else that everyone else can do. Like at youth groups and stuff, I would need to take a break because I could feel them coming on, and they would make fun of me, acting like I was just being a lazy teenager and I didn't want to participate.
When I was in high school, my principal asked me to leave the school and not come back after I had too many seizures my freshman year. So I ended up becoming a dropout because my school asked me not to be there.
Over in 2020, there was a story of a black man that was autistic that was having a meltdown in public, and he got shot because they thought that he was resisting arrest, and he just completely did not understand what was going on.
In our daily lives, we interact with people all the time, whether it be at school, work, or even in our neighborhood. But it is too often that we don't realize that these interactions can be a challenge, especially for those who are feeling unwelcome and discriminated against. A group that often doesn't get acknowledged for their struggles are those dealing with ableism. But what is ableism? Ableism can be defined as prejudice, discrimination, and forced social oppression of those with disabilities. While certain disabilities may be more obvious, it is important to understand that not all disabilities are visible. You may have interacted with someone who has a disability and not even have known it.
Our main reason for why we're talking about ableism is because we believe that ableism is something that impacts everyone. Above all, our goal is to bring awareness and to uplift voices impacted by ableism. We'll be having interviews with people explaining their stories of adversity and how ableism has impacted them. We hope by the end of this documentary, you will be able to see how much more complicated and nuanced the topic of ableism truly is.
To understand what ableism is, we first must go back to look at how it started. Like other forms of oppression, ableism has been around for a long time, even before the term was introduced back in the late 80s. As mentioned earlier, ableism is the prejudice, discrimination, and forced social oppression of those with disabilities. People who are ableists view those with disabilities as incompetent, unfunctional, and even unintelligent due to their disabilities. Even before the existence of the word, ableism has been around for centuries, going as far as back as the medieval era. In that specific period, those with disabilities were seen as people possessed by the devil or evil spirits. Some people from this period went as far as to claim that the disability was a punishment from God. It wasn't until the civil rights era during the 80s that the term ableism began to be used.
What is your name, and can you share a little bit about your disability?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Randall Yasmont. I'm a sophomore here at PSU. I am hard of hearing. I was diagnosed hard of hearing in fall of 2022.
Yeah, so my name is Kate Nicholas. I have, I like to say, multi-disabilities. So I am hard of hearing with ADHD, with PTSD, anxiety, and depression. On top of, I have EDS, or known as Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, post-static orthotics tachycardia syndrome, and mast cell activation syndrome.
My name's Jenna Camplin, and I am a right below the knee amputee, meaning that on my right leg, about halfway through my shin, my leg is amputated. I wear a prosthetic so that I can pretty much have a fairly normal life to a person that has two regular legs.
My name's Martha Mai. I have a learning disability. I have dyslexia, and I got diagnosed with ADD.
My name is Rose Miller, and I am disabled. I have what's called NES, non-epileptic seizure disorder.
My name is McKennis Oren. I currently work at the school's Disability Resource Center as a student and faculty, and I also have an internship with Social Security Administration, which is the agency that you go to when you're trying to apply for disability. And in general, in life, I've been diagnosed with disabilities since I was about 7, so I've always known about that. And I've kind of always known the legal part of it because One of my disabilities is I'm autistic, so I don't understand things, therefore I research them.
My name is Wendy Miller, and I have several disabilities. I have epilepsy and cerebral palsy. Okay, my cerebral palsy affects my right arm and side, and my left side. It crosses over in the nerve system. One side is much smaller than the other. Mobility is hard for me. I'm in pain all the time. It's hard to walk, and it's hard to do jobs that require more than one hand. Because this one, I have to really concentrate to get it to work right. And my epilepsy is affected by the lights in most buildings. So having a job is really hard because after a few hours of working in the business, the lights cause me to seizure. And then it's really hard to go back to work after seizuring and after people overreact to your seizuring. It's hard just to pick up and go back to work and do it all over again because the lights are affecting my brain in a negative manner.
Yes, my name is Yana Garcia, and I have combo ADHD, and I was also diagnosed with PTSD.
My name is Talia Lucas, and I work in the Life Enrichment Education Program for Clackamas ESD. I work with students throughout all of Oregon who have intellectual or physical developmental disabilities in grades K through age 22.
Are there any common misconceptions on disability that come to mind?
A lot. So a lot of the times, especially because I'm hard of hearing, I used when I was at Portland State University, I used interpreters. And a lot of people assumed that I was like completely deaf and I could not hear a single thing. So nobody would talk to me. I stopped using my accommodations to make friends and to have people talk with me.
The first would be that people that have disabilities know that they have them. I lived for 33 years of my life not knowing that I had a hearing problem. My mother always called it selective hearing as a kid, and so I never really second-guessed it. But secondary to that, I would say that there is still, I think, a common misconception that people who have disabilities are somehow mentally deficient, right? That's just not the case. Hard of hearing and many other disabilities does not equate to unintelligent.
I think the biggest thing is that people just want to classify anyone with a disability as like one thing. Even people that like amputees, like they just want to put us in one classification and one spot, and they want to kind of label us all the same. I think really the most important part is that we're just not. Everyone's at a completely different level, and you can't make any judgments or assumptions off of everyone's journey because we're all different.
They think they need to call an ambulance, for one, because they think something's like seriously wrong that a doctor can help me with. And people panic a lot because they've never seen it before. It scares them. I've lost friends because they've seen me seizure and they've got scared. I've had family members not want me as a child to spend the night at their house because they were afraid if I was going to seizure, that they didn't want it to happen there.
I think the asexualization, but also the idea that like a lot of disabled people are considered children. Like a lot of the disabilities that I have are considered children disabilities. I have learning disabilities, I have autism, I have ADHD. So a lot of times those get diagnosed as young, and then people kind of are like, what do you mean you're an autistic adult? I'm like, well, I'm still alive. So I would love that to change for people to actually recognize us more as, I don't like saying equals because that sounds pretentious and stupid, but in a way, I guess equals.
How people see seizures as just one type of seizure, or Another big thing for anyone with seizures is almost like 99% of the time, you don't have to call the ambulance. You don't have to call medics. People know how to deal with the situations by themselves. And calling in like emergency medical services isn't actually going to help them. It often makes it worse. Like for me, I feel the medics touching me and like taking my blood pressure and sticking me with needles and all that for my blood sugar. And it just stresses me out more, and I'm more likely to have a longer seizure because of it. People just automatically think, call an ambulance.
Then it makes you lesser of a person. I just think you have to learn how to work around things differently. And maybe it's a little harder to find those ways to work around things. But I think the disabilities can be abilities too.
The narrative that, like what you see in the media, I feel like the media really portrays in film as well what they think PTSD. When you think about PTSD, you're thinking about war, veterans, bombs, all that stuff. And PTSD can come from something so minor as something that someone said to you, a car accident. For me, it was my childhood. It was my dysfunctional family. My dad was physically present, but emotionally not. And then I also am a survivor of 2 SAs. The list goes on. That not being able to speak is the same as not having anything to say.
I think the biggest thing is that people just want to classify anyone with a disability as like one thing. Even people that like amputees, like they just want to put us in one classification and one spot, and they want to kind of label us all the same. I think really the most important part is that we're just not. Everyone's at a completely different level.
How do you think that we can bring more awareness to the subject, like disabilities and ableism?
I think I always say when it comes to any sort of change and reform, considering all the work that I've done around like policy, community change, leadership, advocacy, starting small to get big.
Having more media awareness would be fantastic. Making disabled characters adults, having them have full stories, not having them be tokenized would be amazing. I also think having autistic people not be robots, that's needed a lot. And as much as I hate it, having autistic people have jobs and things like that, because oftentimes we're seen as burdens of society, and that we need so much accommodation that it's not even worth investing in us. But in fact, many people ignore ableism because they see it as like something for somebody else to deal with. But frankly, you can't change your race, you can't change your sexual orientation, but tomorrow you could become disabled.
Just elevating people's voices, disabled voices, looking at their art, showing their art, like films and books and comics and paintings and stuff. Just like, I think everybody creates amazing things, and I think that disabled voices aren't really seen as much. I think, you can learn a lot from just like listening to people.
I mean, I really think that this is kind of the same with everything that goes on in our world. Everyone has differences, and everyone believes different things or supports different things or lives life a different way. And just normalizing those differences and making sure that people understand that it's okay to love everyone regardless of how they live their life. And especially with being an amputee and teaching kids, I see this a lot with my 5th graders. They have a lot of questions, but they're very accepting of me. Whereas with kindergartners or 1st graders, a lot of them are scared. Something that parents, I think, can do is help to teach them that it's okay to ask questions and it's okay to be curious And there's very kind and respectful ways to do that. It just is something they have to be taught.
I think that one of the things that's really important is listening to those who are impacted by disability. I think that it's really important for able-bodied people to remember that disability is the only minority group that you can join at any point in your life.
I think a way is to talk about it, to talk about accommodations, to talk about disability within classes, to have that intersectionality within the class and bringing it up, because I feel like a lot of times when somebody is told that there's a student with a disability, they just kind of go quiet.
Yeah, I'll speak through my lens of being hard of hearing specifically. I think that'll be the most logical for me. When I think about being hard of hearing, I think about exposure to ASL as an option. I think about exposure to deaf culture. I think about exposure to deaf media. And while things like residential schools can do a fantastic job of providing an environment that is cultivated for deaf individuals to learn, an unintended byproduct of that is that mainstream students don't have an opportunity to see that happening. They don't see those deaf individuals as frequently as a result. They don't see that culture. They don't see that language. And so I would say that if we were able to sort of bring more attention and exposure to mainstream students of deaf culture, I think that would be a great step towards awareness.
Have you had direct experience with ableism?
I feel like I've been very fortunate to have folks who are willing to understand me, but there have definitely been instances where that's not the case. I will never forget when some folks knew some small parts of me, but they didn't really know my story, and I feel like it's really important to get to know someone's story. I used to be called special all the time when I was younger, just because I couldn't stay still in class. I couldn't shut up in class. I couldn't focus on class. And then just kids I was friends with would call me special, and I didn't really know that was an insult for a while. And then I kind of understood that, but then I was like, I don't know, I didn't want other people to know that I was insulted by it, so I didn't really react.
So I do think that I have a very different experience than a lot of people, because in some ways this was a choice for me. So it was a medical need, but at the same time, I did have the choice where I could have kept my leg. I just had zero life. It was very much sitting on the couch or laying in bed. I mean, I raised my children on a knee scooter because when they were little, I couldn't hold them. I couldn't walk around with them. So it was a choice for me in a lot of ways, which I think has some differences. And when I made the choice that I was going to go through it, it's been extremely hard. And I'm always extremely cautious. I would never, ever recommend anyone do this because it has been the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. The amount of pain I had to go through to get to where I am is something I can't even describe. The positive side of that is I've been able to do a lot of things. I complete the Murph Challenge every single year. I've completed a Spartan race. I've done dirt bike racing. I have a goal to climb the tallest mountain in Idaho, which is Mount Bora. So I'm setting goals and I'm getting there.
I struggle a lot with ableism in the community, and especially the community regarding Portland State University. It sucks, especially because I am a person that doesn't look disabled. So when you have invisible disabilities, in particular, at PSU, I had a professor flat out tell me the fourth day that I had this class that I needed to switch classes because he was not going to accommodate me, and that my accommodations were too much, especially for all of the field trips that we needed to go on to for that class. And that would just be easier for me to find another class the second week of school. I had to fight my way through graduating, and I got put on academic probation with a 3.8 GPA due to the fact that I had a disability.
Oh, man. Funny, if not frustrating. A lot of asking people to repeat themselves. A lot of getting frustrated, and after asking someone to repeat themselves, 3, 4, 5 times, just smiling and nodding, like I understand what they're saying. I actually had a roommate who was a speech and hearing pathologist at one point, and we would use sign language to communicate across the bar, which was super fun, right? You ready to go? Yeah, let's get out of here. But outside of that, I think that, it's been largely okay. I've been able to overcome it by reading lips, by sitting in the front of classrooms. And funny enough, I didn't really know I was doing those things. There are still situations where people have really thick foreign accents. It can be hard for me to understand. Or if someone is facing away from me while they're speaking. So if a teacher's maybe looking at a presentation while they're talking, it can be really difficult for me to understand them without being able to lip read.
Just people are very ignorant. Even when I got engaged to my husband, my father-in-law told him that I would be a medical bill for the rest of his life and make him go broke, so he shouldn't marry me. And that's been the furthest thing from the truth. It's just hard to see people's misunderstandings of things.
With like ableism in general and like disabilities, what do you think could be changed about like society wise? Like, what do you think could help those who are disabled?
So I see a lot more exposure out there now. Even like every year, it seems like more like Barbie has an amputee Barbie now. One of my students bought it for me and gave it to me as a gift because this is my teacher. She was so excited. You're starting to see it more on kids' TV shows, and you're just starting to see more people with any sort of disability out there. So I think that's going to help. But I do think just having conversations and people being open and honest is one of the biggest ways that we can, bring any light to any of this, because no one has the same experience.
People need to be more open and honest with their disabilities and how it affects them and their life. And people need to be less ignorant and care about others more.
A lot of, I think like there's social things to help out my life. I think there are definitely systematic things that we can do to help other disabled people. Like I heard this quote, disabled people aren't disabled because of like their body or because of what happened to them. They're disabled because the society they live in are built around like able-bodied people.
Yeah. I think that starts with exposure. I think that the recent film A Quiet Place by John Krasinski was a good example of a way that we can bubble up this culture to mainstream media. I'd love to see that repeated. I'd love to see more representation of deaf culture, of ASL in mainstream media. I think if we can see that start to happen, we'll start to see more of that in our daily lives. And then I think as we plan events, as we create and cultivate environments throughout our lives, ensuring that we have options, right? If you are inviting a friend over to watch a movie, be prepared for them to ask to be able to do so with subtitles. If you are going to watch a movie in a movie theater and you know that a friend that's coming with you is hard of hearing or deaf, make sure that it's showing that offers closed captioning. There are assistive devices in those environments that allow you to do that.
Funding into organizations and resource centers that are supporting those in the front line. And then also, supporting us as well in the things that we're doing, because you don't see that often. I mean, when was the last time we saw a grant for somebody who has a disability, or a scholarship, or programs just specifically for them? They're super rare.
I think there needs to be more handicap accessible places, and even some places where you go to park your car, there's only like one or two, and sometimes it's only wheelchair accessible, and a lot of people have mobility issues that aren't in wheelchairs. So sometimes it's harder because it's harder to go around a store if I have to walk so far to a store and so far back to the car. Even though most of the time you can't see my disability, I have the disability.
Do you have any other thoughts, stories, experiences, or remarks?
Yeah, absolutely. Two quick anecdotes come to mind, maybe even a third. But the day I left the audiologist with my hearing aids was wild to me. I did not know that my car had an audible door chime when it was open. So that was fun to discover. I texted my partner and I said, "Hey, has it always made that sound?" Which was kind of funny. Secondary to that, hearing leaves rustling in trees was a wild experience for me after getting hearing aids. And I think that sort of speaks to the level and type of hearing loss that I have, which is specifically at a higher frequency. I kind of joke that married men couldn't hear their wives as well with this kind of hearing loss. So it's kind of lost on me, unfortunately. But yeah.
For instance, I work in a self-contained classroom, which means that I work in a regular general education middle school, and my students are confined to their classroom. They only leave to use the bathroom where the sink does not work. And why would they fix it? Because only the SPED kids use it. They're not involved in school, aside from the fact that they go there. They're not involved in gym. They're not involved in lunch. They don't get to go out to recess. They don't interact with the general education population in any way. And I think that special education is good, but it could be better.
The fire alarms and auntie are so quiet that it is a safety hazard. It was a safety hazard when I lived there, that due to my hearing, I couldn't hear the fire alarms, and there is no flashing fire alarm. Portland State University offers a rescue assistance program for anybody living in dormitories. So if there was to be an active fire, or if there was some type of alarm happening with the building you are in, people with disabilities can sign up to be part of a list where you get like rescue away. In June of 2020, as an example, I recently had knee surgery to prevent my knees from completely dislocating, and I could not put any weight on my legs. So I could not go up and down stairs. I could only use the elevator. But at 4 a.m, we had a fire alarm going off, and we both could smell smoke in the building. Something was on fire. We waited. We waited a good 5-10 minutes. But at one point, how long can you wait before it's too late is what we had to discuss to ourselves. My roommate was thankful enough to help me hobble down 11 flights of stairs. However, I slipped and fell down the stairs and actually needed to get another surgery. And these are things that constantly keep happening.
It's week 8. Yeah. It's week 8. The next available appointment for the DRC is probably about 2 months out. So that's about 2 months that you can't get accommodations, and the teacher is not required to give you accommodations before you're approved. So that's very common in the fall. And so we tell people to get accommodations as soon as you get into school, as soon as you do that. I don't know, like I could talk about like how you get disability, like money for being disabled, how you go on disability. You basically can't be married. You can't work for a year before you file. If you do get married, your disability benefits go away, and you have to stay below minimum wage to receive disability. If you start making too much money, you lose it. And then sometimes they make you back pay. They're like, well, we paid you disability for these times you were making too much money. Therefore, you owe us money. So there's a lot of red tape. So even getting like a disabled person into work, sometimes you can't even accept bonuses. You can't accept promotions because you're like, well, I'm going to lose what I need. But also, that money is not enough to get you your accommodations that you need. You can't get mechanical wheelchairs because they cost thousands of dollars. You can't have savings because that's considered an asset. If you have a domestic partnership, sometimes they'll consider you as married, and that means that you can't get your benefits anymore. And if you put your money in your parents' or your children's account, then that's considered fraud. And so they keep disabled people poor to keep us in control, but also because they don't want disabled people really around, because we're not seen as contributing to a capitalist society. Disabled people's lives and purposes and thoughts are just as valuable as everyone else's, and we have a right and need to be heard and seen in mainstream society. And the need for accommodations should not be something that people determine whether or not you're qualified.
So with the DRC, they definitely could check up on folks more and create more accessible tools. They have like a small arrangement for things, but there are certain things that I feel like you kind of have to petition for. And so I kind of had to be a little pushy with them, because turns out that my test accommodations were never given to me. Then I had a final and it was timed. Then if you know me, having a 10 test is not worth. And the next appointment was like 3 weeks from then. And I was like, my final is like in 2 days. And thankfully, and everybody was out of office. It was such a mess. And like, y'all need to have an emergency hotline number, period. But they got it fixed. Got my testing accommodations. But I had to go out my way and push that. And I had to go out I'm okay with going out my comfort zone, but imagine somebody doesn't.
As we have heard, ableism can occur anywhere at any time. It can even happen in our communities where we think it's safe. Oftentimes, a lot of victims go unheard and they don't have a voice or platform to share what they have gone through.
A community outrage tonight after a pair of students bullied a special needs classmate and then shared that video to social media. Our Kelly Kennedy explains what happened and why parents and students are calling for a harsher punishment.
I've learned that 2 students here at Northwest High School in Canal Fulton encouraged a freshman student with special needs to remove his own feces from the toilet. Now, while that student did that, the other students laughed at him and then took a video, later sharing that on social media.
He appeared to mock a reporter with a disability. Take a look.
Written by a nice reporter. Now the poor guy, you got to see this guy. Oh, I don't know what I said. I don't remember. He's going like, I don't remember. Oh, maybe that's what I said. This is 14 years ago. They didn't do a retraction.
That reporter he is talking about is Serge Kovaleski, who now works for the New York Times. As you can see right there, he suffers from a chronic condition that impairs movement of his arms.
New at 10, a former principal with the Fresno Unified School District is facing charges of cruelty to a minor. A video surfaced showing him shoving a special needs student so hard he fell to the ground. The school placed Brian Volhart on administrative leave, but he resigned and got another job at a nearby school district. Now that district also put Volhart on leave.
Jessica Fuqua is talking about this video showing her 7-year-old son Christopher being ridiculed.
They just start embarrassing me in front of the class.
Christopher is a 2nd grader with special needs. He was sent to this 7th grade classroom to see the counselor.
So the counselor was acting as a 7th grade teacher that day. So she said, no, you're going to sit in here with me. I'm not going to send you home. I'm not going to call your mother. You're going to sit in here with me.
The video first shows the counselor aggressively talk about Don King.
The fact that you can't tell me who Don King is pisses me off.
Then it gets worse.
You want to fight? Come on.
She asks Christopher if he wants to fight and even takes money out of her purse to bet on the winner.
I put money on the winner.
The 7th grade students taunt Christopher to tears.
These are some examples of real-life experiences that have happened in the real world, which is why it's so important to always stand up for those who can't speak for themselves. Until we are able to shut down these wrong ideals, ableism will continue to affect others and cause harm to those with disabilities.
Like many other kinds of oppressed groups, people dealing with ableism are also targeted in systems of oppression. One example is the education system. Specifically in higher education, only 1/3 of students with a disability who are enrolled in college can get their degree within 8 years. There are a multitude of factors that contribute to this, such as economic struggles, mobility issues, and prejudice against those with disabilities, with the social labeling that those disabilities don't belong in higher education. But schools, now more than ever, are making an effort to make higher education accessible for all students, whether it's through providing accommodations for students to making school campuses more accessible.
Living with a disability makes life more challenging in and of itself. But for some, ableism isn't the only form of discrimination they face. Things like race and sexuality may compound the amount of discrimination a person may be subjected to. With the understanding that not all disabilities are visible, it is important to be mindful of actions and words and how they may affect people with disabilities.
So what can you do? A good first step is to listen to those with disabilities. Remember that people with disabilities are people first and are not defined by their disabilities. We hope that you'll continue to listen to others with disabilities outside of the interviews shown in the documentary today. We're not their saviors, and we have to work together to move forward in creating a more inclusive future. We encourage you to educate yourself and others about the impacts of ableism, to join organizations and support those with disabilities, and in general, to be inclusive to everyone. At the end of the day, we are the human beings who deserve to be treated equally and with respect.
I think it just comes back to everything. Like, just everyone needs to learn to love each other and accept each other's differences and try to get to know people for who they truly are and look past what you see on the outside.
Be empathetic. Empathy can get you a long ways, and we need more empathy in the world. I know it's like really stereotypical, but you don't know what people are dealing with. And just having that mindset of being helpful and non-judgmental and not pummeling people with questions, because that's just awkward. And when you see something that's different from you, don't freak out. That's just rude, you know?
It's hard. There's so much work that needs to be done. But I will always say it starts with you. Whether you are the one that's causing the barriers, the issues, the harm, the good, us. Change starts somewhere. And like I just said, we are not a problem. We are not a burden. And if you cannot deal with us, work on yourself. Reevaluate and educate yourself.
Just care more about other people. Don't be so stuck in yourself to not realize people out there are struggling in their own ways too. Just to be more caring. And help somebody if you see their struggle.
I think the main thing that I would hope people would take away is that you could be disabled at any point for any reason. How would you want to be treated? We have to do the work to make the world accessible. And it's important to listen to people who have the courage to speak out instead of speaking for them.
Everyone is one bad day away from being disabled. Remember that and prepare accordingly.
Ableism is a killer. It kills thousands of people, and you probably know some of them, and you don't even realize that they're struggling. And if we ask you for accommodation, if we ask you for help, please don't ask more questions. Please give us what we need. But also, for disabled people, remember that your worth is not how productive you are in capitalism. It is how happy you are. It is how much fulfillment you have. It is how much you feel you are bringing to your own life. That is not based on how much money you make or how other people view you. And diagnoses are messed up, and the DSM is screwed up, and it sucks, and it's all bullshit. But I hope that you get to see a future where we have more rights and accommodations, and we don't have to have conversations about ableism, and we get included in talks about accessibility and equality and equity, because it is not just people of color, and it is not just gay people. It is disabled people, it is homeless people, it is countless other people who are needing and fighting for the same things.
Advocate for yourself. You don't have to do it on your own. I don't think anyone should do it on their own. But you have to know your value and know what you deserve, and go out there and look people in their eye and tell them what you're worth.
Talk to people, help people, talk about disability, talk about how it's affecting, like, even people with disabilities, how it's affecting your life and how other people can improve it. Because without us talking about it, there's no way to improve it if we're all just quiet.
So, are there any other experiences, thoughts, stories, or remarks you have to share regarding disability and ableism?
I don't know. I'm gonna have to think about that. No.